Hey everybody, Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of having a chance to chat with songwriter, guitarist, and more important than all, bassist, Dave Starr. How you doing today, Dave?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing good.
Super, super. Well, we've got a lot always to cover, but as usual, we always want to start with the beginning of your journey in music. Tell us a little bit how you got started, how you kind of came into playing bass.
Well, my I've kind of flipped back and forth, but I originally was what got me on the to where I am today is what influenced a lot of hard rock and metal musicians from my generation. I'm 56, and that was a friend of mine loaned me Kiss Alive back in 1976. And I had never heard them. I'd heard of them, but I'd not actually heard them. And he goes, "You got to check these guys out. They're really crazy." So I checked out this album, and it basically changed my life. And I went out and got an Ibanez Flying V, and started taking some lessons. I mean, I wasn't really very good, but that's kind of what got me on the path to wanting to play music.
Mhm.
I played in some terrible bands for a few years because I couldn't play my way out of a paper bag. Um, I was too rebellious to take lessons seriously. And I ended up. It seemed like in every band that I was in, we had a hard time hanging on to bass players. And so somebody broke into my apartment and stole all my guitars.
Oh,
And I had a tax return coming, and I told myself, you know what? Maybe I should use this money to buy a bass because I only have enough good money to buy a really good bass or a really good guitar. So that's how I ended up becoming initially a bass player. Was by all my guitars got stolen, and every band I was in, we just couldn't seem to find. Nobody wanted to play bass. Everybody wanted to play guitar or sing. So that's really I got a. This was about 1981, I think. So I went to Leo's Music in Oakland, California, and got a G&L L2000E. It's a pretty nice bass, especially for somebody who'd never played bass before.
yeah.
And I spent that summer uh, just going over like old Scorpions, AC/DC, Judas Priest, Kiss. I mean, learning kind of all the foundation of hard rock, heavy metal stuff, UFO, Saxon, whatever. And that's how I ended up becoming a bass player. I never really was somebody that necessarily fell in love with playing bass. I kind of felt like nobody wants to do this, so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be good at it. I just wanted to play music,
Hmm.
and it did open a lot of doors for me. Um, I've kind of gone for full circle. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but but that's how it all began.
Got you. Well, and sometimes it's an event that is a real bummer, like having your guitar stolen. That's always terrible. But to have that be kind of the catalyst to get you on the road to playing bass. And so then with the bass work in your progression, you started joining, playing with bands and just kind of working forward.
Well, I spent that summer of 1981 just kind of teaching myself how to play the bass,
Hmm.
trying to mentally prepare myself as okay, you're a bass player now. You gotta know what you're doing. So I started. It came pretty easily. I started figuring stuff out, and I started putting ads in. Of course, this is long before the internet. I started putting ads in the bulletin boards of local music stores, and
Hmm.
got got a couple responses. As usual, there was a handful of dead ends before anything really good came up. But joined a band and started doing the heavy metal scene in the clubs was really starting to boom in the San Francisco Bay Area around 81, 82. So I started. I joined a band and started doing club gigs, and it was pretty exciting. I mean, not just to sit necessarily to say playing bass was exciting, but just to get up on stage in a real band in front of hundreds of people was a pretty cool feel. It was exciting.
Hmm.
I was, 20, 21 years old, so everything was pretty new and exciting back then. So that's how I got my start playing bass. Things changed a little bit over the next couple of years, and I ended up joining a band called Vicious Rumors, or VR for short.
Hmm.
And that ended up putting me on the map because I ended up doing, um, depending on who's counting, 7, 8, 9 albums with them, and touring around the world and doing videos on MTV. We did a couple albums on Shrapnel, and we got signed to Atlantic, and so it was a pretty crazy time. I had a good 10-year run with that band, and it was a lot of fun. Got to go around the world, videos on MTV, equipment endorsements with Ibanez, and uh, string companies and pick companies, and the whole floodgates opened up. So it was a lot of fun, and I think for somebody who never took any bass lessons, I think that you can go back and listen to those old records, and I think that I think I did a really good job,
Hmm.
and it was a pretty good time.
Got you. Well, and for some of our viewers that may be younger, there was a time when MTV actually had music on it, which hence the M.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, that was pretty exciting doing those videos. I flew to Hollywood, and an interesting story about the videos. We did two uh, videos for MTV for that band off the first two albums that were on Atlantic, our third and fourth albums. But
mhm.
um, the video director was a struggling filmmaker at the time who was probably as broke as we were. He worked for Julian Temple with a company called Nitrate Films. And this guy, his name is, oh wow, I'm drawing a blank here. I might have to scream at my wife to give you the. Um, he went on to become one of the biggest directors in Hollywood. Uh, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay.
I think the first two. I guess I'm showing my age because I was going to say I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. It's Gore Verbinski.
Okay.
Who, if you look up Gore, if you're not familiar with him, but if you look at Gore Verbinski up on the internet, he is direct. I think his movies have generated something like $5 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. So the first big blockbusters that he did were Pirates of the Caribbean. So he was directing rock music videos back then.
Hmm.
So that's kind of an interesting little side note. So it was great to say, yeah, I've worked with Gore Verbinski, one of the biggest Academy Award winner too. I think he did that animated Rangoon.
Okay.
But yeah, he's Academy Award winning director. So that was kind of fun.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And kind of progressing along because you had again 10 good years with Vicious Rumors. Now you are and fill in the blank if there's something in between, but WildStar. The kind of the play on the names, both you, Dave Starr, and your wife, London Wild. She got front billing, which is great. Put her up front. That's wise.
Yeah, she's better looking than me, and she's my wife, so she gets to go first.
Absolutely, absolutely.
She's
Well,
talented.
and ladies first, so it's a chivalrous approach
Yeah.
to it. But that explains WildStar. How did that get started?
Well, if you want to back up a little bit,
Sure.
I was hired after I left Vicious Rumors. I kind of went through a struggling time in my personal life, uh, substance abuse, a lot of hell. Um, but I ended up London and I had known each other since 19. We've known each other for 30 years. We've been married now for 16. And we hooked back up. We lost track of each other for a couple of years. We hooked back up on the internet. And we ended up dating, and make a long story short, we ended up getting married in 2001. Shortly thereafter, David Chastain, who's a very prolific neoclassical shred, even though I hate that term, shred guitar player, he probably doesn't like it either, but he hired me to play bass on the In and Outrage Chastain CD that came out in 2004. And that was the first time that my wife and I actually worked together, because this was an album that was done digitally in different studios around the country. So I ended up doing this record without even meeting David. I didn't meet him until he flew out, and we did a video later on, but the tracks were done on a Tascam, oh God, VS, one of the VS machines.
Sure.
And my wife, who's very knowledgeable with computers, ended up engineering the bass tracks for that album. So we recorded them in our home studio. That was around 2002, I think. The album didn't come out until 2004, but that was the first time we worked together. And it was around that time that we started talking about the possibility of writing some music together and doing some of our own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so around 2005 is when I finally got clean and sober. So that was a real critical part of the story, because I basically had a foot in the grave, and I wasn't going to last much longer. I was literally in pain, physical pain.
Yeah.
So I knew that if I wanted to do this with my wife, I had to get my act together. So I got myself clean and sober, and part of my rehab was I kind of locked myself away in my home office and just started writing songs and making music and being creative. And the more I played guitar and the less I drank, I had booze in my system, in my brain, the better I got, And before I knew it, Lennon and I were writing songs together, and the stuff was sounding really good. And by the time we recorded our first album, the Arrival CD in 2008, 2009, came out late 2009, early 2010, but I've been clean and sober for a couple of years, and really only been a serious guitar player for a couple of years. Because before that, I could really just bang out chords, get my ideas across as a songwriter, not as an accomplished guitar player like you can hear on these 3 albums that we've done. And our original idea was because I didn't think I was going to be good enough, so our original idea was I was going to call in favors from people I'd worked with in my career, like Vinnie Moore, Brad Gillis, David Chastain, and have them help me out on guitar tracks on the album. But the longer I stayed clean and sober, and the better I got on the guitar, I said, you know what? I just want to do this all myself. And when I look back on it now, it seems like it would be kind of arrogant, because I really nobody knew me as a guitar player. They knew me as a bass player.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Dave, he's the bass player from VR, Vicious Rumors. He's playing guitar now? Well, that's kind of weird, because I was 44 years old it's rather late in life to decide you want to make a radical change like that.
Sure.
Especially the kind of music that we're playing, which some may call progressive. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of guitar harmonies. There's multi-guitar tracks. I play 8-string bass. My wife's got this, creative, amazing voice, and the compositions are rather, I don't want to say sophisticated. That sounds a little arrogant, but they're involved. There's a lot going on.
Gotcha.
But we did it, and it worked out, and we've done it for 3 albums now. The 3rd album just came out. What's today? The 12th, 11th. Just came out 3 days ago. So for 3 albums now, I've done all the guitars and bass myself, and it's been an interesting journey. I think most people my age, I'm 56 now, tend to maybe their glory days maybe were in their past, and they're living off things that they did, and I'm some of my favorite bands I think are kind of doing that too these days. But I feel in all honesty, that the best music that I've been making in my career, and I've got, I don't know, 16, 17 albums out, the best music I've been making in my career is with WildStar, with London. And at least that's how I feel about it. And I think a lot of the reviews that we get kind of back it up. So it's neat to be doing something that's, I feel is really profound, and I really hit my stride at a rather late time in the ball game, which is good. Just so they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, I did it. I somehow did it. I somehow did it and pulled it off, and we've pulled it off now for 3 albums.
Which the newest one, so that people know, is titled Beyond the Rain. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I find, you're absolutely right. With, especially I'd say a lot of the rock bands from back in the day, they kind of had their moment and then you never heard from them again. And then there were some really iconic ones that even with age, kind of like a good wine, they got better. And you listen to them. We were just, speaking of guitar players, we just got to listen to John McLaughlin playing, and he's 75.
Yeah.
And he is not missing a beat. I mean, he is so spot on. So age is where you are in your head, basically. It's like,
Yeah, it is definitely true, and all of my musical heroes are all pushing 70.
Yeah.
They're in their 60s, pushing 70, or some of them are in their 70s. So that's 14 years ahead of me right now. So I think that when I was younger, I probably thought 56 was a death sentence, but now that I'm 56, and especially 56 being clean and sober for 12 and a half years, I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel good. I'm obviously being very creative and very productive. I found not just with music, but being clean and sober, you tend to get a lot more done in life. Not just musical, but you tend to get more done around the house. Things get done on time.
Sure.
It's a good feeling. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, and tell us more. Let's come back up to Beyond the Rain. Tell us a little bit more about this album. I've listened. It's definitely heavy metal. It's interesting when people categorize their music, because the prog rock people consider anything that is like progressively now rock, but there are, I don't know, maybe thin lines defining what is prog rock or not. I kind of felt like it was kind of a power trio of heavy metal kind of thing, listening to London's vocals, crazy mad drum work there. I'm just going, oh my gosh, it's just insane. What niche do you put it in?
Well, there's so many. Heavy metal and hard rock has gotten to be so fragmented over the years that it's like, are you in this niche? Are you in this niche? Are you in this category? Well, if you do this, we don't like you, and that's not heavy enough. That's poser music. It's just, to me, I like to call it. I like to call it great music. That's what I call it.
There you go.
Because to me, there's only 2 kinds of music. That's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really up to whoever's listening to it. Sometimes I love something and my wife doesn't like it at all. Some of the bands that I'm influenced by, my wife doesn't like at all. Some of the stuff she likes, I don't like. But it's all up, like I said, there's only 2 kinds of good, bad. Okay, so what do? I think we get compared to early Queensryche, Judas Priest, Dio. It's what I think metal fans would probably call traditional metal, the stuff from the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people say, it's funny, we've heard some people say, well, traditional metal is like, what makes you want to do that? Or how come, why is that? Well, it's kind of the pointless question, because you grow up listening to music, and that's the stuff you're influenced by.
Mm-hmm.
Early Scorpions, early Judas Priest, Blue Oyster Cult, UFO. I could go down the line. Thin Lizzy, I'm a big Thin Lizzy fan. So if people compare us to that era, I don't consider it a knock at all. You're a product of your upbringing,
Sure,
musically. So I tend to not really listen to a lot of new music, because I don't have a lot of time. Mainly when I'm listening to music is when I'm writing music.
mm-hmm.
But I don't want to listen to new music a lot, because I don't want to be influenced by something that's out there right now. Whereas if I'm influenced by something that came out 40 years ago, a lot of people may not even know what it is.
Sure.
So they say everything goes in circles. But yeah, we seem to get pigeonholed into this traditional metal, classic metal sound. But I also think, like, I just did this interview with another magazine lately, and they had me do the 40th anniversary of the Judas Priest Stained Class album, a kind of a retrospective of what I thought of it. And I listened back to it, and I go, some great songs, but man, the production is so stiff. So, and there's a lot of albums that have really stiff production on them. Mm-hmm. But the stuff that we're doing, I think the production, it's traditional metal, but it has a modern sound to it, because the production is so much more elevated today with the gear that we use and the production values. And so it's traditional metal with a modern edge to it.
Gotcha. Well, and you're absolutely right. I think definitely all musicians are influenced by other things that they've heard, but it's also a challenge to not let that be the thing that's kind of filling your head when you're writing, because you end up with tunes, and there's been a few cases where they've, which escapes me in memory, but somebody has a song, and then down the line they're going, hey, that was this other guy's song. What do you, what do you mean? And I hear sometimes they'll pull like classical music in, because it's not like Beethoven or Bach are going to come back and say, hey, those 4 bars are directly from what I wrote. But definitely some influence of patterns and chords and tones and things. It's not an unusual thing.
Yeah.
So with the new album, with Beyond the Rain, again, just you end up doing both the guitar work and the bass work, right?
Yes.
Excellent. And London's vocals are they again, we go back to reminds me of some very early Ann Wilson Hart kind of reach. She has got some range that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, she gets compared to Ann Wilson. She mainly gets compared to the guys, because, for better or for worse, it's changed a lot over the last maybe decade or so. But traditionally, metal's been a 99.9% male dom. So she was interested in Rob Halford, Jeff Tate from Queensryche, Ronnie James Dio. I think those were her 3 main singers, and they're all males. Mm-hmm. But she does remind me a lot of the classic Ann Wilson from Heart, mm-hmm. who's an incredible singer and songwriter.
Totally. Well, and I'd be remiss if I didn't remember to ask you about the gear that's giving you your voice playing bass. What are you playing on?
Well, everything I do for I don't know how many I use a custom 8/8 bass.
Okay.
And not 8 with a surfboard neck. I'm talking 4x2.
Yeah.
So
Tom Peterson kind of.
Yeah, I was first introduced to the eight string back when I was in Vicious Rumors, and I picked up one of those funky old Kramer aluminum neck eight string basses,
Hmm.
which wasn't really a great bass. It was medium scale, and the the aluminum neck combined with the medium scale kind of gave it a real tight mid-rangey sound. It wasn't really a great sounding bass,
Hmm.
but I used it for a couple of tracks on our third album. Then I ended up getting an Ibanez endorsement, and I had them help me out with doing an eight-string bass, which I still have. Um, the ones that I use now are ones that I put together. I've been doing guitar repair work forever, so I have the ability to do this. I got some custom-made necks from Warmouth.
Hmm.
They make a production eight-string neck, jazz bass bodies, EMG, jazz bass, active pickups, Schaller hardware, and I put these things together myself, and we tuned to low C, so it's C, F, A sharp. What's the next one? G sharp, D sharp. I'm drawing a blank on that, but it's C, all low C all the way across.
Gotcha.
So like standard E tuning or whatever, drop down to C and then all the way across. With the root, say, is a 126, and then the octave tuned an octave higher for the one next to it is 65. So they're basically half the dimension. So I just find that it gets a really. I've used eight strings for everything from the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 albums I've recorded. I just love the sound of it. Sometimes in some of the more frantic things that we do in heavy metal, like with WildStar, the beauty of the eight string kind of tends to get a little lost. It's, I think, a little more identifiable in the downstroke picking, more mid-tempo songs. Like there's a Double Red, which is one of the that one, and Crimson Fifths, which is the ballad, where the eight string really has. I mean, it just has a huge sound to it, which is just thundering, and I just love it, and I've just kind of stuck to it and used eights for everything that I do. And not a lot of guys who play eight string basses, not sure why, but every time I go back to a four string, I still have lots of four string basses, but every time I go back to a four string, it kind of feels like I'm playing a ukulele because eight strings are hard to play.
Yeah.
They're hard articulating those. There's so much pressure on those necks with those giant strings.
Hmm.
But maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, but I just love the way it sounds. It just has a huge orchestral like sound to it. I did try the 12 string like Tom Peterson plays from Cheap Trick. Didn't really, because it's basically a root octave and then a unit octave, another octave in unison.
Yeah.
So it didn't really add anything to me. So I thought I'll just stick with the 8. Although you can do, I have done some weird experimenting where you can tune, you can do some weird tunings. You don't necessarily have to have root and octave. You could do root fifth or root in a fourth or something to get some weird tones. But generally it's root and fifth. And I passed on the 12 string. It just seemed a little too crazy for me.
Gotcha.
Stick with the 8 string.
Well, I think you hit it on the head when you said not a lot of people like to play them because I've had other players tell me that they're just difficult and they're hard on your fingers, and but they like the sound because it has such a full voice.
Yeah, it's got a great sound to it. It's not fun to play, but once I listen back to it, it sounds really cool. And so in the studio, it's great because I just record the bass tracks and everything goes pretty smoothly and punch in here or there. But it's I'm so used to doing it that I'm used to the punishment. It's mainly it's really tough on the left hand.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, but it's just the route I've chosen in life.
Gotcha. Well, and I'm sure if you're playing that predominantly, you end up again with the appropriate calluses on your fingertip. Your body helps protect you a little bit from the punishment of the double strings, but
Well, another interesting thing I just thought of with the eight string is, see, back in the day with Vicious Rumors, I used to play a lot more on four string bass, kind of more like maybe Steve Harris from Iron Maiden,
Hmm.
playing a lot more fluid bass lines and kind of running around a lot. With an eight string, I don't feel the need to do that. I almost use it more like an orchestral instrument where I just get that thundering sound out of it because I don't feel I'm doing three jobs in this band, a minimum of two guitar tracks,
Yeah,
left and right, plus the eight string bass. So I don't have to show off because I'm doing everything anyway.
sure.
If people like it, they're going to like me. If they don't like it, they're not going to like me. So I don't feel the need to play a billion notes on the bass anymore. So with the eight string, I'm tend to playing more simple things because every time I'm playing, I'm hitting two notes anyway,
Sure.
and it just has such a great, wide, huge sound to it that I find myself, I don't need to play as much as I used to. Just kind of groove more and let the huge sound of the bass do its job.
Gotcha.
Take a step back, but have a bigger sound.
Gotcha. And coming past the bass itself, what kind of amplification are you using? Or
In the studio, because we primarily just do studio work with this
Mhm.
band, um, I I use I go direct in. I think I may have mic'd a Crate bass amp on the first album, but to be honest with you, I really can't remember.
Mhm.
Generally, I'm going direct into the uh,
Into the board?
it's
Yeah.
the Cubase 5 software that we use for recording, and
Gotcha.
then inside there, and I'm not real good with this computer stuff. My wife is a computer engineer, so she's explained all this stuff to me. And there's an SVT stack in there, and all these other bells and whistles. So I'm playing through sort of an SVT setup inside the Cubase 5 computer,
Gotcha.
just by going direct. So it seems to work with me. I like, to be honest with you, I get really fidgety and impatient. And I think if somebody's told me, well, today we're going to experiment with mic placements on the cabinet, I'd run out of the room. I can't deal with it. I just want to sit down and I want to play.
Yeah.
And maybe that might be sacrilegious to some people who, have the same thing on the guitar. I don't use any guitar amps. I use a Sansamp GT2 amp emulator,
Hmm.
basically. And I'm not using it because I don't want to deal with miking cabinets or dealing with Marshall amps or anything. I just think it sounds great. It sounds really good. It sounds huge.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's in a little black box the size of the distortion box makes it even better. So I'm
Totally.
into simplicity. I just want to play. I don't want to sit and experiment with amps. My job as a songwriter and bass player, guitar player is get in there, make sure I have great sound, but I just want to play. I just want to rock.
Got you. Well, and
Yeah.
for many players, finding their sound is that constant search. And I'm sure you see, you mentioned having other basses. A lot of players have what we refer to as gear acquisition syndrome, where they keep looking for that perfect instrument. It's going to have the voice that they want, and it's going to have the sound they're looking for. And then, with a lot of rock, we see a lot more pedal usage and uh, effects, if you will, and then you start going to the amp, and there's nothing that says that simple isn't a good way to go. I mean, it's just everybody's got to find how they want to get to their particular point.
Yeah. I was never one of those guys that was always buying gear. I have a lot of guitars. I sold off a lot of stuff years ago. I've mainly kept instruments that I did tours with and albums with
Mm-hmm.
and videos with, things that have sentimental value. But for 3 albums now, I've used the same bass for all the bass tracks. I use Gibson Les Pauls mainly in the studio. I have 3 Gibson Les Pauls, but I'm not one of those guys. I don't have any pedals. I don't have any effect pedals, um, and I like to keep it simple. And sometimes I've had guitar players tell me, well, if you really need to use this Marshall, or you really need to use this WildStar, this Hughes and Kettner, or whatever, and I just say like, hey, my guitar sounds great to me. I don't hear anybody reviewing our albums complaining about the guitar tone.
Yeah.
So you can spend your time on this endless search for guitar tone. I'm making records.
Gotcha.
Okay. That's what I'm all about. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to sacrifice good tone. I obviously want great tone. I just have my way of getting it. But I refuse to go on these endless searches like some guys do, and ladies don't want to, for this, I just find something that works, and I generally stick with it.
Gotcha.
And devote, because I'm more interested in devoting my time and energy into creating music.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think some people get a little too weirded out. I told this guy, and I'll tell you a funny story. I told this guy once, because I've always done guitar electronics and done pickup installations, and I knew this guy was a really good guitar player, and I was always changing pickups for him. And one day I said to him, I go, you know what? You need to stop doing this. I go, you come in here every month and have me change pickups. What is it doing for you? You're not doing anything with your guitar other than bringing it to me and spending money changing pickups.
Yeah.
And he looked at me like he was going to punch me, like he was really upset. But I just felt, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This isn't making you a better guitar player. This isn't getting you a record deal, or this isn't helping you write songs. You're on this search that you're never going to be happy with. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I regretted saying that to him, but.
Well, if you make a living putting in pickups, yeah, that might have not been a good thing to do.
Well,
but...
I felt like after the 10th pair of pickups in his Les Paul, I felt like, okay, I've made enough money on this guy. He's been my friend for 20 years.
Yeah, it's excessive.
If he doesn't want me to do guitar pickup installation anymore, it's okay. I'm going to stick my neck out on the chopping block and tell him he's wasting his time and money. But anyway.
Gotcha.
But there's a lot of guys like that. Now, what I tell people now these days is, if somebody wants me to try something out, send it to me. You want to send me something? I'll try it out.
Sure.
But I'm not going to be spending thousands of dollars buying gear that I have, may or may not use. But whatever. That's my opinion.
Got you. Well, and I think a lot of times, if you're fortunate and with you kind of building your instruments, you've got the specs that you're looking for from the beginning. I think that a lot of times people will get an instrument that had the manufacturer's specifications, and they don't care much for that sound, and that's where they start making some changes. And I myself have a couple of basses that I changed the pickups on, but it was just from what it had stock to something that was a step up. So I took out some stock pickups and put in some ENGs on one of my basses. I took out, I've got a old mid-70s Fernandez, and the pickups were not great for what I wanted, and I changed them into some Rio Grandes, and I got the sound I wanted. But that's about the end of the line, and I kept all the old ones just in case. So if I ever decide, hey, I want to go back to the original thing, then I'm good.
I've been using EMG pickups. I'm an EMG artist on their artist roster, and I've been working with them for I don't know how long, but I really like the sound of the active jazz bass and the H string. And some people say on the guitar that their pickups are too one-dimensional, that all they're good is for mind-blowing distortion, and you can't get any clean sounds out of them. Hey, I've got some great clean sounds on the WildStar albums using the EMG active pickups. I use the 81 in the bridge and the 89R in the neck. The 89R is a coil splittable pickup, so you can get a single coil, kind of a cool Strat sound out of it on your Les Paul, or mix the bridge and the neck. So that's how I get my clean sounds. But I think overall, they just make really, really good, great stuff, and I've been with them. I was using their stuff for years before I got an endorsement with them.
Gotcha.
So But yeah, I really love their stuff, and I've been using Ernie Ball strings. I've been with them on the last two albums, and I've used everything. But I really like the way the Ernie Ball stuff works for me for what we're doing.
Gotcha. Well, and moving right along with the new release, Beyond the Rain, where would be the best place if somebody wants to find out more about it? I saw wildstar.com.
Yeah, WILDESTARR.com.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they can buy CDs direct from us, and the advantage to that is that we personally autograph them to the fans.
Nice.
But you can also find them online at Amazon, Best Buy online, Target online, a bunch of other affiliates that are doing the mail order thing. So
gotcha.
this is a really great album. This album is basically based on my brother-in-law, who was a pretty good guitar player, but never really got to get anywhere really doing it like I've been blessed to be able to do. Not that I'm a household name, but he sadly committed suicide while we were recording our second album. And so my wife, the whole family was really traumatized by this. He just basically, gave up. And so my wife ended up writing this entire album. It's basically a concept album about her relationship with her brother and the trials and tribulations that he had in his life. And it's a really sad story, but we chose to grieve through our music, and partly as a testament to him and tribute to him. And I even used one of his guitars on the album too, so that was kind of special. But it's a really profound album with a lot of there's a lot of really heavy lyrical meaning that London did, pouring out her thoughts regarding her brother and his tragic life and demise. So
gotcha.
It's not your typical heavy metal album lyrically.
Mm-hmm.
There may be heavy metal or hard rock albums that are concept albums, but they may be fictional, or a story about something that you didn't actually was true, but you didn't experience. This is a concept album about an actual member of our family who took his own life. And I think it's a very timely thing with the high profile rock suicides that unfortunately we've had over the last several years. And, it's a tragedy that's affected too many people.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and not wanting to leave this particular topic, however, I always do have to ask, usually when people complete one project, they're already starting to think about the next one. What are we looking forward to from WildStar?
Well, I'm constantly writing. My writing mode is I sit on the couch in the living room every night and I watch horror and sci-fi movies and I play the guitar. That's when I write music. I never go into a studio to write a song. I never hook up to an 8-track or something to lay down. I sit on the couch watching crazy movies and I'm just constantly writing riffs. And if there's something I think I'm not going to remember, I'll play it into my iPhone and record it. So I have a whole memory bank of. This album just came out. I've already got an album or two worth of material that's in my head or on my iPhone.
Yeah.
So we're kind of figuring out where we're going to go from here. We had toyed with the idea about taking a break from WildStar and doing a side project with a cast of international musicians and maybe doing something like that. I've talked to a couple of people, but lately it's because we've gotten such good feedback on this new album that we're kind of thinking like, do we really want to deviate from this? Maybe we should just pour right into starting number 4.
Sure.
And put our feet right back in the fire again. So we don't tour. We get to ask that all the time. You haven't asked us. If you weren't going to ask us, thanks, because we always go, why don't you guys tour? So we strictly, when we started this thing out, we were going to be an actual band.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a hard time finding people that shared the vision that London and I had for making the music that we wanted to do. So to make a long story short, that's how I ended up doing all the guitars and bass myself on the first album. And then I just said, you know what, this is working. Let's do it again. And we did this Telltale Heart in 2012, and then we just did it again with Beyond the Ring. So we've just shunned the idea of touring. We get offers because I've sold a lot of records in Europe and Japan throughout my career, and so there's offers on the table, but we're very private people, and I did an extensive amount of touring, and I wasn't really crazy about it. There are certain things I liked about it. There are certain things I didn't like about it. I don't like being away from home, and we live in a really, really awesome house on a big piece of property, and we got 6 Russian wolfhounds here. So we have a lot of incentive we're happy here.
Gotcha.
So we're just going to continue doing studio work. We haven't ruled out playing live or touring, but for the foreseeable future, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, which is cranking out studio records, which is what I'm happy doing it.
Gotcha. Well, Dave, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing so much of your journey and your music. Folks, make sure you check out Beyond the Rain, WildStar.com, and that is WILDESTARR.com. I'll put it in print underneath here so everybody can see it as well. And we'll look forward to seeing the next project and hearing more music from you guys. So thanks again. Folks, you've seen it here. Dave Starr coming to you live on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.